And the Republican-led House of Representatives has just passed the first 6 appropriation bills for fiscal year 2024. And Speaker Mike Johnson relying on Democrats to pass the controversial funding package. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez joins us from Capitol Hill. So Luis, what can you tell us about this legislation and why is its passage in the House taking so long?
Yes, Steve, good evening. Well, it's a very controversial funding package. The House of Representatives has been working in agreement to fund government through fiscal year 2024 for over 5 months past the deadline. So since October 1st of last year, government has been funded via continuing resolutions or stopgap bills. That latest CR or latest stopgap bill is set to expire this Friday for 6 of the government departments. So we're going to run out of money and we would have faced a partial government shutdown. Now, the controversial part, Steve, comes from how Speaker Mike Johnson presented the funding package in the House floor. Freedom Caucus members wanted to have an appropriations process in which each of the 12 appropriation bills was debated and voted on separately in the House floor. Instead, Speaker Johnson chose a strategy of presenting 2 groups of 6 appropriation bills lumped together, one with a deadline of this Friday and the second group of 6 appropriation bills due before March 22nd. Let's hear what Speaker Johnson had to say about this strategy.
It takes a long time to turn an aircraft carrier, and we're doing that gradually. We're forcing reforms, trying to force Congress back into the mode, the statutory mode, the lawful mode, in the way in which it's supposed to work with regard to government funding. That means 12 separate appropriations bills, not all lumped into one.
So Speaker Johnson, of course, defended his strategy. He touted spending cuts for the EPA, the FBI, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm Bureau. But Freedom Caucus members were relentless in their criticism, Steve. On Tuesday, Freedom Caucus released a statement in which they were calling on fellow congressmen to vote against the funding package. And actually, 83 Republicans and 2 Democrats voted against this funding bill. I want to read to you, Steve, and to our audience part of this Freedom Caucus statement released on Tuesday, because I think it was very telling of the political strategy happening here in Congress. So on Tuesday, the Freedom Caucus released a statement in which they warned Speaker Johnson that, and I quote, "The omnibus surrender Republicans' leverage to force radical Democrats to the table to truly secure the southern border and end the purposeful, dangerous mass release of illegal aliens into the United States." Now, Steve, the bill, the funding package that has been approved by the House of Representatives is going to go now to the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer earlier today indicated that he's going to bring it to the floor of the Senate as soon as possible to meet that Friday deadline and avoid a partial government shutdown. If that does happen, and if the president signs the funding bill, then we'll see $460 billion dispensed to 6 government departments through fiscal year 2024. That means through September. Back to you, Steve.
And today's Luis Martinez reporting live from the Capitol. Thank you, Luis. And Chinese-owned TikTok is once again in the hot seat. This coming as the White House says it's now backing a bipartisan bill aimed at targeting TikTok's access to the United States market. NTD's Sam Wong has the details on the new legislation.
It's another round of action targeting TikTok.
And allowing a CCP-controlled entity like TikTok to become the dominant media player in America would be like if in 1962, at the height of the Cold War, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis, we'd allowed Pravda and the KGB to purchase the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, and NBC.
On Capitol Hill Wednesday, a bipartisan group of lawmakers announced new legislation titled Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Control Application Act. The bill specifically describes TikTok and its China-owned parent company ByteDance as threats to U.S. national security. If the bill passes, TikTok will face 2 options, either to divest from ByteDance within about 5 months or to face a total ban from all web hosting services in the U.S. A TikTok spokesperson responded to the legislation, saying it will trample on First Amendment rights of 170 million Americans. But lawmakers said the bill isn't about going after the app itself, but rather to address concerns surrounding its ownership structure.
Our goal is to decouple TikTok, and other platforms from the malign influence and control of the Chinese Communist Party.
Americans' data is always at risk of seizure by the CCP.
This is a CCP-controlled company claiming to stand up for constitutional rights while simultaneously engaging in slavery and horrific human rights abuses.
What's more, the legislation also allows the White House to designate certain applications controlled by foreign adversaries, namely China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Experts and top U.S. officials have long voiced concern over ByteDance's ties to the Chinese Communist Party. More specifically, that it could force TikTok to submit American users' data.
The legislation that we've got out today is a product of particularly the last year's worth of work. People are starting to recognize that this isn't just about my data might be not being used properly. No, that data is being used to attack you and attack our country.
The House Energy and Commerce Committee will mark up the bill Thursday. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Sam Wong, NTD News.
And separately, a bill targeting Chinese biotech companies is now moving forward through the Senate. The Senate Homeland Security Committee voted earlier today to approve a bill that could restrict businesses with companies like BGI and Wuxi AppTech. The bill is designed to keep Americans' personal health and genetic information from getting into the hands of foreign adversaries. And joining us now to talk about an alarming situation is Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas. He's been sounding the alarm in recent days about criminal activity by a Chinese mafia group known as the Chinese Triad, operating right here in the United States.
Senator Roger Marshall, thank you so much for joining.
Steve, glad to be with you again.
Great to have you, Senator. If you could, talk to us about what you've uncovered in your investigation into the growing power of the Chinese mafia, also called the Chinese Triad, specifically running their operations right here in the United States, as well as their affiliation or alliance with the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah. So, Steve, we see massage parlors just jumping out at us all over the state of Kansas now that are operated by the Chinese Triad. And of course, human trafficking is coming in behind this. I didn't really understand even myself until the last couple of weeks the depth of the Chinese Triad, this underground mafia that's had a presence in the United States certainly for decades, but it's just exploded over the last several years. Specifically, this Chinese Triad is running the money laundering. So as we've seen this growth of fentanyl explode with the cartel doing all the dirty work, they've been working hand in glove with the Chinese Triad. So the Chinese Triad is the ones doing the money laundering. And just to back up a little bit, for decades, the Chinese Communist Party has made the fentanyl precursors, and before that, the methamphetamine precursors. They would hand those off to the Chinese Triad, which would bring it to Mexico, hand it off to the cartel. The cartel would run the drugs and then sell them. And like I said earlier, take over the money laundering part of it. And now coming in behind that, everywhere you were seeing fentanyl poisoning, drug trafficking, you're going to see human trafficking explode as well. At least that's what my local sheriff's officers, police, highway patrol, Kansas Bureau of Investigation is telling me. We now have more massage parlors than we do Starbucks coffee cafes.
It's unbelievable, Senator. I mean, we know that the CCP is involved in state-run organ harvesting. So state-run prostitution schemes certainly seems like it would fit into their business practices, if you will. When you take a step back and think about what this regime is actually doing, at a certain point, does Wall Street and Washington, for that matter, have blood on their hands when it's business as usual and folks continue to label China as a friendly competitor?
I think we do. And I think that's something we're trying to look at up here in Congress. Even just today in committee, we banned doing business with several Chinese related businesses. Now, just through the committee level, it's got to go to the full floor as well. So I think that more and more Americans are waking up to this. More and more Americans are seeing that the CCP is leading the world in counterfeits, in the cybersecurity attacks, biosecurity issues as well. I think now every American is starting to understand the depth of this. And if I could just bring it back to this triad, the Chinese Triad, we as Americans think that there's right and wrong. But members of this underground mafia, blur right and wrong. So they have legal and illegal activities setting side beside each other. And to them, there's no right or wrong. And that's what we is so drastically object to, where we're seeing 14, 15-year-old girls victimized. We're seeing people smuggled from China through Turkey into Colombia. And this is where they then next cross the Darien Gap. And sometime in there is where these people are enslaved, for lack of a better word. When people start this journey from China or from overseas, they usually pay about $5,000 just to start the journey. And then they're supposed to pay another $5,000 once we get here. So when they get them at their weakest moment, when they're starving to death, when they're bruised, they're battered, they're dehydrated, they're hungry, they say, look, this is how you're going to pay this off now. You can either go work in the Chinese weed farms where they're going illicit and legal and illegal marijuana, or you can go into this prostitution ring, the massage parlors, that type of thing. So it is very complex, very sophisticated.
Senator Roger Marshall, really appreciate you joining us on this important issue.
Thanks, Steve.